Phenomenon. Non-terrestrial biological entities. Codename Gray. First detection predates electromagnetic civilization. Behavioral profile. Non-reactive. Surgical. Non-communicative. Objectives classified. Incursion sites correlate with population centers and genetic variance clusters. Containment attempts inconclusive.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Common Anomaly podcast. I'm your host, Stuart James. Joining me today is Clayton James. This is Season 2, Episode 9, and we're going into everything Gray Alien. How's it going, brother?
It's going good today. It's hot out there.
It's really hot, yeah, and we had to close all the windows and doors so we couldn't hear my neighbor with whatever construction project he's working on this afternoon. So, yeah, it's going to get a little toasty for us in here. But that's fine. What are we doing today? Tell me about this.
I thought that's what you were doing.
Oh, right. Okay. I can take that ball. No problem. So, yeah, I mean, this was my idea. I just had a brainwave after our last episode. I was trying to figure out what we're doing this week. And I saw something. I can't remember what it was. Or maybe it was something from our last episode. But I was thinking a lot about gray aliens, you know. And I thought, why don't we do an episode completely dedicated to the alien greys, because we did discuss them a lot on the last episode, because
J-Rods.
J-Rods and that version and that particular
that
story narrative that they're actually humans from the future that are time travelers.
Yeah.
So I just got to thinking about all the different various narratives and stories and lore there is around greys, and I kind of wanted to do kind of like a compendium episode, right? Where we just kind of unpack all the different varieties of gray aliens and all the different lore that surrounds them and see if we can make any sense of it.
Yeah, it's such an archetypical image. You know, you say alien, extraterrestrial.
It's the first thing you think of.
And they're automatically probably going to think of that image of, you know, that big oval-shaped head and the big black eyes and the gray skin and the whole thing.
Super skinny, you know, clammy skin.
But where exactly did that start? Where did that image come from?
Well, obviously, the X-Files, right? It's like,
no,
that's where we all know it from, right?
No.
Well, and that's what I'm hoping we can get a little philosophical in this episode, because, there's kind of one of the biggest questions in my mind is, where did these things come from? And not just in a sense of they exist, what planet did they come from, but how did they enter our kind of collective subconscious? Obviously, it's an image that we just said, it's everywhere in pop culture and media. X-Files, every movie you've ever seen, you know, they're everywhere. Books, television. So if they don't exist, how did this image, like you say, how did this archetype get created? Mm-hmm. Right? Where did they come from? So, yeah, I'm hoping we can build a kind of a chronology as well, of just to see if we can pinpoint an origin for how they entered our collective, kind of collective psyche. And so you can go pretty far back in time. I was trying to dig online and see how far back in history I could go. And dig up an image or an account of something that sounded like a gray alien. And I mean, you know, you can go back to 1961 and the famous Betty and Barney Hill, which is, you know, what popularized the abduction phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right? They were kind of the first big case that entered the public sphere of an alien abduction.
Yeah.
Right? But you can go farther than that, because 1947 you have Roswell. Right?
Yeah.
The famous Roswell crash. Also, small gray aliens. Very fit that description. You can go back to even farther than that, to 1919, and Aleister Crowley encountered an entity through some magical experimentation he was doing called LAM, that we've discussed before. Very much matches the description of a gray alien, and even made sketches of it.
Yeah.
You can even go into prehistory, basically, into the oral traditions of the Hopi Native American people, and they describe ant people that saved them from multiple global catastrophes that live underground and came and taught the Hopi people about agriculture and astronomy.
Yeah, and I mean, parallel to that, not just in North America, the Aborigines in Australia had these ancestral sky spirits that they would paint pictures of.
Yeah, there's even cave paintings, right?
Cave paintings of them, and they look exactly like gray aliens.
Yeah.
You can go back even further than that to the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki, the gods that came down from the sky, and they're often depicted with, enlarged eyes and elongated skulls.
Okay, so let's pick one of these avenues to start teasing apart. What's your favorite? Where do you want to start?
Well, where I started was Roswell.
Okay, yeah, great.
I think that's
great starting point.
I think that's the earliest gray alien phenomenon we have some solid records on.
Yeah.
So yeah, 1947, July 1947. This rancher, his name was Mac Bransell. I think I'm saying that right.
Sounds right.
Yeah. He had a ranch just outside Roswell, New Mexico, and he finds some very strange debris on his ranch. Strange metallic debris strewn about. He doesn't know what it is. So he reports it to the Roswell Air Force Base. And the next day, on July 8th, the Air Force Base releases a statement that they've recovered a flying disc, an extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they immediately retract that.
Yeah, it was big news. And everyone immediately got very excited.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, wait a minute. My bad. That didn't happen.
Yeah, they less than 24 hours later, they're like, no.
Yeah,
it wasn't a flying disc.
That's the perfect conspiracy.
It was a weather balloon and nothing else.
Yeah, let's make an official statement and then immediately retract it.
Yeah. And thus a legend is born.
Yeah,
what better way to create a conspiracy theory?
Yeah, absolutely. It's immediately suspicious.
Yeah, so two different narratives emerge here. Yeah. There's the official narrative, which the government maintained until 1995. Until 1995, they were saying the crash in Roswell, New Mexico, or just outside Roswell, was a weather balloon. And then in 1995, they changed their story. They said, actually, we can tell you about this now, that crash was actually part of a secret, at the time, project called Mogul. And we were using high-altitude balloons with a bunch of radar equipment on them to detect at long range Soviet nuclear tests. And the strange material that was recovered from Roswell is actually like radar reflectors and different sensors and stuff that would have looked very sci-fi at the time.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that they changed their story like right in the mid-90s.
Yep.
It was an interesting time for them to do that because right around the same time we had the alien autopsy footage surface.
Yeah.
That was a big thing in the mid-90s on Fox, that huge special, the alien autopsy.
As well as the alien interview, right? Where an Eben is being interviewed and has some kind of seizure or attack, right? Those came out around the same time, right? Or they were in close succession, weren't they?
I think so, yeah. But anyway, the alien autopsy footage, it was supposedly... in theory, it was this former U.S. Army cameraman had this footage taken after the Roswell incident of bodies that had been recovered from this flying disc that had crashed. And it's about 15 minutes of very grainy black and white footage of these bodies being dissected. Yeah, they look very much like the typical gray aliens. They're short. They've got these big oval-shaped heads. They've got the black eyes and the whole thing. That was a huge sensation at the time. Created a lot of true believers and a lot of people that it's like, this is a hoax. This is hoax footage.
Yeah. But yeah, like you say, very controversial. And of course, everybody has spent, the decades since tearing apart, analyzing, debunking, rebunking, if that's the term. And it still remains very split. There's obviously true believers that feel like this is, smoking gun evidence. Other people say it's just a really good puppet. or
Yeah.
special effects. And I don't know, where do you stand on that? I'm kind of agnostic. I'm not entirely convinced. They're compelling. There's a lot of things about those
Yeah.
pieces of footage that are compelling and interesting and line up with certain other factors that might give it some credence. But
Well,
what do you think?
there were portions of that footage, the alien autopsy footage, that were proven to be fake. They were proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be fake. Now, this film producer who put this all together, Ray Santilli, he actually admitted in 2006. He said, yeah, portions of it were reconstructions because the footage was too degraded and too damaged, so we had to reenact portions of it.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mix of real footage and reenactments we did, and that makes the whole thing sound more suspect.
Yeah, that's immediately makes the eyebrow raise.
Yeah, once he's parts of it,
especially especially if you don't establish that immediately up front.
Yeah.
Right? You would have had to say that right at the beginning. Hey, by the way, this portion is real. This portion here is reconstruction. If you're not being immediately transparent about that, it brings the whole thing into question.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Agreed.
And
Agreed.
And there was this other video you sent me. I think it's more recent, a more recently surfaced thing. I don't know too much about it, but it's out of Russia.
Yeah, it was out of Russia. It's very very much in the same vein of the alien autopsy footage, but it's supposedly found or leaked KGB footage of captured gray aliens. I guess it looks like they had a crash that they crashed in somewhere in Russia, and where kind of one of them looks like it's in distress after the crash and maybe is dead.
Yeah.
But if you look at the footage, it still looks like he's moving around on the ground.
Yeah.
But then later there's other short chunks of footage, and it all came that pieces of footage, I think they were just anonymously released on YouTube from account that didn't post anything else except 4 short clips of this footage, of this recovered footage from the KGB. And similarly, it is kind of compelling at parts and looks pretty realistic. Other times it kind of looks like it's maybe CGI or animation. But I mean, it does date back to the early 2000s. So if it is CGI, it's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah, so you sent it to me. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what to make of it, but I watched it. And my first thought was parts of this, anyway, that look almost AI generated.
Yeah. But it's way too old, that. It predates that. I think they're from like 2006.
Yeah. Apparently...
I was doing a bit of follow-up research on that after I discovered this, and finding some other commentary and other people trying to debunk it. And I guess if you look at because it's got a timestamp on the video, as like a lot of 90s handycam footage would, right? It's got a time counter at the bottom of the screen, and you can see the footage is actually slowed down.
Okay.
It's not at true speed. And I guess I didn't see an example of this. I couldn't find an example where someone had done this, but I guess if you speed it up to normal frame rate, it looks way more realistic.
Okay,
than when it's slowed down, because you're seeing eyes blinking and facial muscle movement, right? Those are the parts that look kind of fake or look kind of animated.
That's probably why I thought it was like AI generated, because it just had this
slightly uncanny
look to it.
Yeah, that makes you go, oh, this is fake. But I guess if you're looking at a regular speed, that cleans that up a lot and it looks normal. But then the question in my mind is, why slow it down then? Why is it being presented at 1/4 speed if it makes it look less genuine? I don't know. I more or less came to the conclusion that it's probably hoax or some kind of viral marketing that was very popular at that time. For one thing, a lot of times when you're looking at something, the hallmark of something that's hoaxed is if the video or the video clips are extremely short. That can be a red flag, as these were. It's 4 separate pieces of footage that are somewhat out of context from each other.
Yeah.
You noted right away something that's because the first couple shots, there's like aerial shots of the spacecraft.
Yeah, the size is really inconsistent.
Kind of flying over a house.
Yeah.
And then you get another piece of footage that's of the crash site and the alien on the ground. And if you compare the two, the size of the craft looks inconsistent. It looks much smaller after it crashed than when it was in the air. That can be a hard thing to judge, when you're filming an aircraft from the ground.
Especially on such like grainy...
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. And I guess some of the debunking of it that I found is some of the film grain that you're seeing. Mm-hmm. There's like watermarks and stuff, and it's from stock. It's stock watermark stuff.
Okay.
Right? So someone's
put
a filter. Someone's put a grainy filter over it.
A film grain to it.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's obviously been some level of doctoring to that. That doesn't necessarily disprove the entirety of the content, but why would you add that feature, right? For drama, maybe? I don't know. So I don't give it a ton of credence. It's really interesting footage, and again, just kind of a fun thing I found because I've never seen it before. Mm-hmm. I've been into this stuff for a long time.
Yeah,
so it's always exciting to find something you hadn't heard of before or seen before, eh?
Yeah.
That's a good one. I'd forgotten all about that. I'll have to link to that in the show notes.
But anyway, we got way off track.
Yeah, we were talking about Roswell.
We were talking about Roswell.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, official story, weather balloon, or eventually Project Mogul, Soviet spy balloon thing. Conversely, people started believing, they actually did retrieve a crashed extraterrestrial craft. And whatever technology came with that, and bodies of extraterrestrials. And where was all this taken? What happened after that? Well, this kind of is like the trinity of conspiracy theories, the trinity of alien conspiracy theories. You've got Roswell, which led to the creation of an organization called the Majestic 12, which operated supposedly largely out of a place called Area 51.
That's right. Which was not acknowledged until like
2013.
2013.
Yeah, the existence of Area 51.
Even though, we all knew about it for a long time before.
We'd all heard of it.
Yeah.
It was like the least secret
base. Yeah. And who was it that blew that whistle?
Our friend Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar, our favorite. Yeah. And it kind of connects all of those points.
Yeah.
So, like you say, like you've mentioned before, if we had a big cork board on the wall with some red twine, this would be the kind of trinity at the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's see. Where should we start? Majestic 12. Apparently, this was the U.S. government's direct response to the Roswell incident. It was a government task. This is supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly.
There are leaked documents about Majestic 12. Whether they are legit or not is very hotly debated, but supposedly it was a government task force created by President Truman. They would answer directly to him and no one else, and their purpose was to recover, investigate alien technology, and to manage the public perception of the existence of extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
I.e., conceal it from the public at all costs.
Yeah. Well, and you could interpret that a number of ways. Yeah, it could be concealment, but you say manage public perception. Immediately sounds like we're going to construct the narrative and we're going to decide how people are going to view and understand this phenomenon, which might not necessarily be limited to strict denial. Right? And there's also a lot of speculation that the entire phenomenon, some people write off the entire UFO phenomenon and the flaps we saw in the late 40s and 50s and onward as a direct result of a psyop to kind of trick the Russians through the Cold War into thinking we had much more access to much more advanced technology than we really did.
Didn't we have a psyop just like that just recently?
Yeah, I think we did.
We did a whole episode on it. the mystery drone phenomenon of last year.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily buy that particular narrative that the whole entire, again, that's a baby in the bathwater thing, where I don't think you can write off the entire phenomenon as a psyop, but I think that's definitely a factor with how it appears in media, and whether that be official government statements or things like movies and television and popular entertainment that incorporate these ideas, could all be nudges in one direction or another of how they want this story to be perceived, right? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know what I think, other than they're not being straight with us.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree.
I was really disappointed with how that whole drone story sorted out in the end, because just before he got elected, Trump was talking about how there's something going on here. I'm gonna release all the information.
Then he very much did not.
The people deserve to know what's going on here. Clearly, something's going on, and after he was elected, he basically said, "There's nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it."
Just very casually dismissed the whole thing. Yeah, and I would say the way I've always looked at this is you don't need to know what the truth is to know that you're being lied to. You don't need to have an understanding of what the real truth is to just know that you're being deceived somehow. And that's what I get when you look at a lot of this, again, kind of government debunking or lies of omission. You can spot those things.
Yeah.
Right? So then it becomes an exercise of, I guess not necessarily what is the absolute truth of this, but what is being hidden, or how are we being lied to? How are we being deceived, right?
Quite a bit. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, but anyway, I feel like I sidetracked you again. Where were you headed?
I don't know. I was... Okay, we were on Majestic 12.
Yes, we had established our conspiracy trinity here.
Yeah, so we've talked about the official narrative on Roswell.
You've got your facts straight this time, don't you? You got all your details in order. You verified everything. I just remembered just this second that there was a shout out I really wanted to do. Maybe we'll leave that to the end of the episode. But anyway, I just want to make sure you got your facts straight today.
Yes, I have my facts straight on this very speculative tale about flying saucers and aliens from the planet Serpo.
Or I thought it was Zeta Reticuli.
The planet is Serpo. The star system is Zeta Reticuli.
Gotcha. Pardon me.
We're gonna talk about.
Facts straight.
I've got the whole history and lore of the planet Serpo. In the Zeta Reticuli system, and this species of Ebens that lives there, who we know as the Gray Aliens. We're going to get into all that, but first we're at Area 51.
Okay.
This is where the Majestic 12 organization took these recovered bodies from the Roswell crash, and one of them was actually still alive.
Yeah.
In documents, supposed documents.
Yeah.
May or may not be
supposed.
Yes,
you're in permanent air quotes here. It's like you just got your hands in front of you like a T-Rex, and you're just making air quotes constantly.
Well, I don't want to be accused of being poorly researched.
Okay, documents. Yeah,
documents reference this entity that became known as EBE-1.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial Biological Entity 1, colloquially referred to on the base as NOAA.
Yeah.
And NOAA was, or EBE-1, was housed at either Area 51 or S4 for a number of years. He eventually learned to speak English, and he told the people of Majestic 12 about his culture, his planet. He shared technology with them.
Slow the train for a moment here. He learned to speak English?
Yes.
I thought they communicated, entirely telepathically.
No, not entirely. So they call themselves Ebens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do they call themselves Ebens, or do we call them Ebens?
We call them Ebens because that's the closest noise we can make. That sounds approximate to what they refer to themselves as.
All right, fair enough.
And they supposedly communicate in these I've got it written down here. I wanted to be very careful with my wording. They basically communicate with a mix of telepathy, but they also communicate in these tonal bursts of clicking noises.
Right. Actually, that does make sense to me because I recall some stuff I was researching indicating that they don't have any teeth, but they do make kind of, these kind of murmuring guttural noises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In bursts. Tonal bursts. That was very specifically described. But it's a mix of telepathy in that. But yes, in time, EBE-1 learned to speak English and told the people at Area 51 or S4 all about his planet and culture, shared technology with them. And this led to, eventually EBE-1 died. Mm-hmm. I believe it said he died in 1953 after living on the base for several years. Got some sort of mystery illness. The doctors obviously
just too much time on Earth.
Yeah.
Right?
The doctors had no idea how to treat this.
Yeah.
So EBE-1 died. But through EBE-1 staying with them, this led to, a relationship between the US government and these EBENs.
Right.
Eventually led to an exchange program called Project Serpo.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Project
Serpo?
I have,
yeah. Really fun.
Yeah. Supposedly this was a Majestic 12 project. The EBENs kind of proposed this to us, where we would send 12 highly trained United States military personnel to live on the EBENs' homeworld.
Yeah.
For 10 years. Actually, no, it was more than that. It was 13 years they were there.
Yeah. Some of which died, right?
Yes, 2 of them died. 2 of them decided to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the rest came back, but they were very sickly. They were all suffering from radiation sickness.
Yeah.
And all of them had other mysterious effects, like they would age really rapidly when they returned to Earth.
Right.
And it
must have been psychologically very challenging. I mean, just going to an alien planet in the first place, just the culture shock would be off the charts.
Yeah.
Right? Human beings can experience culture shock even within our own species, just going to a foreign country where no one's speaking the language.
Yeah.
And the cultural norms are very different from where you come from. You can experience culture shock, right? Imagine a completely alien environment. And a lot of the accounts I've heard of over the years and seen about alien greys is that it's very difficult for human beings to interact with them because their mental telepathy abilities are so strong that it's psychologically could be damaging or confronting for most people just to be in their presence, and that people have a kind of just break down into total fear or just have complete mental breakdowns just being in the same room as one of these creatures, because their mind immediately psychically overpowers your primitive human mind, right?
Yeah.
And you can't handle it. You just can't process the interaction.
Yeah. H.P. Lovecraft talks about that quite a bit in his writings, when he talks about these cosmic entities that are in his books, that just seeing one of them will, like if you were just to look at, a creature like Cthulhu, just seeing it would instantly drive you mad.
Yeah. I actually... I've been on social media a lot this week because I've been trying to engage and trying to garner attention for the show.
Yeah.
And it's actually been a lot of fun. I've had some really interesting interactions with people, and it's actually helped with research because I've been stumbling upon people's posts and different articles things are posting. And this really interesting one popped up about a study. This doctor, I don't have all the details in front of me, so forgive me if I don't get the facts straight. But there was a study, a psychological study, indicating that human beings, this is the initial finding, do have latent psychic abilities, but it's kind of like they're suppressed, right? Okay. And if you go down, and it just started me down kind of a thought experiment for myself, because what I've found a lot is it seems like every single one of the variants of alien races that you find in lore, they're all telepathic. Yeah. They all have psychic abilities to one degree or another, right? And it seems that we have them, but they're suppressed somehow. So it made me think, could that be an intentional thing? Especially if you go down the route of the Anunnaki, and if we're like an uplifted species that have been genetically engineered for some purpose, that those abilities were intentionally tweaked down. They turned the dial down so that humans couldn't have that edge, couldn't have that play on the same level.
For what purpose?
For control, right? Because maybe they wanted us just to be miners and mine gold for them on Earth, right? Or maybe they engineered us so we could be soldiers in a future war that they're planning with another extraterrestrial race, is something you hear a lot, right? I'm going way out there, I'll admit, right?
This sounds like the Zecharia Sitchin book.
Yeah, very much, right? Yeah. Very much. But that's the stuff I find that's fun when your brain just kind of spirals down a rabbit hole of fun ideas. But that was a fun article and made me think about that. Anyway, again, I'm derailing you.
Oh,
sorry.
That's
Continue.
fine. I can't.
Serpo.
I don't mind at all. Anyway, Project Serpo. So this cultural exchange happens. These people go and live on planet Serpo for 13 years. Again, in the Zeta Reticuli star system. We actually talked about Zeta Reticuli before when we were talking about Bob Lazar.
And Betty and Barney Hill.
And Betty and Barney Hill bring up Zeta Reticuli. So Zeta Reticuli, it's a binary red dwarf system. It's about 37 light years from Earth. Am I correct so far?
Yes, as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting thing I found. I wanted to mention this because I wanted to mention it in our Bob Lazar episode. I was kicking myself for not mentioning it, so I'm mentioning it now. Earth's radio bubble. We've been sending radio signals out into space, traveling at the speed of light for a while now. Radio first started being broadcast in like the 1890s, but not with the kind of strength that would reach outer space. Only sometime in the 1910s, between 1910 and 1920, did radio signals get strong enough to actually travel into outer space.
Right. Yeah.
But if you look at and this is an expanding bubble of radio signals traveling outward from Earth, when would that have intersected Zeta Reticuli?
I have no idea.
Sometime in the mid 40s,
right
before our first incident with flying saucers, the Roswell incident.
Ooh, excellent. Spooky.
I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. No, when you brought that up, it sparked a memory here, so I had to jump to this other part of my notes when I was researching, and I found a note on the Dogon tribe of West Africa. So I would really like to go into the Dogon in a later episode in far more detail. Again, I think I was telling you about an old acquaintance of mine, Laird Scranton, who has gone really deep into the Dogon. I'd like to think I could swing getting him on the show at some point, but I've got to do way more homework before I do that. But anyway, the Dogon people of Mali speak of the Nomo, amphibious beings who descended from the sky in a spaceship. They were said to come from the Sirius B star system, a star invisible to the naked eye, which the Dogon mysteriously knew about long before modern astronomy. And that's the hook with the Dogon, right? Is that they've got this lore where they're like, oh no, there's these beings with big heads and big black eyes that came from this star system, and they know exactly where it is, even though they don't have telescopes. They're a remote African tribe. They don't even have a real written language. They have their language is all symbols and iconography, similar to, it's kind of like a Proto-Egyptian language.
Okay.
And their history is entirely oral, right? But they don't have any kind of modern tools or equipment in order to study astronomy, yet they're aware of this star system. They're aware of it as a binary system long before modern astronomy even discovered it.
Interesting.
Very interesting, right? So anyway, just you had sparked that memory for me, so I had to jump there. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, anyway, that's Zeta Reticuli, planet Serpo, the home of the Ebens. It's described in great detail in these leaked Serpo documents. Again, there's two suns in the sky. Doesn't really have a proper day-night cycle. It doesn't have days or nights.
Tidally locked.
Yeah, and that kind of tracks with... It's theorized that a planet in the habitable zone of a red dwarf would probably be tidally locked.
Yeah.
Because the habitable zone is so much tighter into the star.
Yeah.
So it would most likely be tidally locked. So that actually tracks.
Should we drop some just factoids for maybe people out there if they don't know what tidally locked means?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
Sure, yeah. So if a planet is tidally locked, that means it's like our moon and Earth. The same side always faces its sun. So it's got a side of the planet that's always facing the sun and a side that's always facing away.
Yeah.
And if it's in the habitable zone, it's thought that the twilight area, basically the band...
The Terminator.
Around the center... would be the habitable zone where the temperature would be just right. And hopefully there would be weather systems that would help temperate the rest of the planet. But the side facing the star would be either way too hot or be exposed to way too much constant radiation. And the dark side would be way too cold. But the habitable zone of the planet would be in this ring kind of through the Terminator line.
Yeah. And wouldn't have, day-night cycles as we know them, but they would exist in this
perpetual twilight
place that was habitable,
which would explain big eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I've got something interesting on that coming up.
Okay.
But anyway, Serpo described as having a thin but breathable atmosphere, 1/3 Earth gravity. The culture of the Ebens is very advanced, obviously, but non-materialistic. It kind of describes kind of the geography of Serpo a little bit. Vegetation is low and sparse. Has a purple, gray, or black color to it, which kind of tracks. If a terrestrial planet, were around a red dwarf, it's theorized that vegetation, instead of being green, would be kind of black in color.
Right. Yeah.
Due to difference in the light spectrum. Wildlife on Serpo is described as slow-moving, docile, and reptilian or insectoid in nature. Ebens themselves are described as moving with a robotic-like efficiency and coordination. They don't have a specific leader, but operate more as a hive mind. Again, it goes into these, they speak in these, for different reasons, sometimes ceremonial, they'll speak in these bursts of clicking noises.
Yeah.
But they prefer to communicate telepathically.
And that does scan with a lot of other accounts you hear and a lot of other lore around the gray aliens, is that a lot of people have observed, say, in abduction accounts, that there's often the shorter kind of drone or worker bee grays, and that there's usually someone in charge, like a coordinator, who's a little bit taller, maybe a little bit paler, or in some instances like this crazy great or green mantis like insect that's actually the authority and controlling the actions of the greys. But yeah, very much kind of that insect hive social structure. Yeah.
There's very little art on Serpo, though the Ebens do use their architecture as a form of expression. They don't have a god in the religious sense.
Right.
They believe in a universal energy source. That's kind of their closest analog to God. They apparently find our concept of God very fascinating, but completely alien to them.
Right.
Anyway, all this got me just wondering what the purpose of this Project Serpo was. Why did these Ebens if the humans to stay with them? What are they getting out of it?
I assume it was a cultural exchange, right?
Yeah.
That's what you would think initially if you're developing kind of a diplomatic relationship, just like you would with a foreign country. You'd establish an embassy and, they would have a presence in your country, they would have a presence in yours.
Yeah. So there's two kind of narratives here about the Ebens when people talk about Project Serpo, because the Ebens seem very benevolent and they actually felt really responsible for the Roswell incident and causing
so much disruption to
so
our
much
society.
disruption and the death of one of their own. And they thought establishing this relationship would be almost some sort of karmic alignment for them, making things right, basically. And they offered us technology in this cultural exchange. And that's one of the narratives, is that they're very benevolent and altruistic. But there's another narrative that the Ebens are actually getting something out of this.
Yeah.
And this ties into the abduction phenomenon.
That's right, yeah.
And that the Ebens are a dying race.
Yeah. And they actually need human genetic material.
Yeah.
Or our blood plasma.
Yeah. They're a dying race, and they're having trouble reproducing naturally on their own.
Yeah.
So they are harvesting genetic material from humans.
Yeah.
In order
and
to
that there was,
create some sort of hybrid to perpetuate themselves.
and there was an agreement. Again, it was Truman, you said, right?
Yeah.
That Truman made in exchange for, either their propulsion or weapons technology in exchange for license, basically.
To abduct as many humans as they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
It wasn't Truman that made that agreement. Truman started the Majestic 12. That agreement supposedly came later. Eisenhower signed that agreement.
Oh, right. Yeah. Gotcha. Perfect. Yes. Thank you for that correction. But anyway, the hole that I immediately need to poke in that logic is they obviously do not need any kind of political agreement in order to execute abductions if they wanted to.
No, they don't.
Right?
What are we going to do about it?
They obviously have the agency to do whatever they want based on their superior technology and mental capabilities. Why enter any kind of formal agreement with us, right? It's like we don't enter formal negotiations and write up a treaty when we want to build an ant farm.
Well,
or a beehive, right, to get honey.
At the
right?
time,
you just do it.
at the time, I mean, I'm just gonna hypothesize here.
Yeah.
At the time, in the 1940s and 50s, humanity would not pose much of a threat to these gray aliens. What are we gonna do to stop them?
Yeah.
However, we've captured one of their craft. We have access to their technology
already. Right. Gotcha.
And
we're advancing.
We are on this track of exponential technological growth.
Yeah. We could be a threat in the future.
We could be a threat very soon in the future.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah. Anyway, where was I?
I derailed you again.
Where was I?
I feel like that's all I'm doing this entire episode is just throwing curveballs at you, trying to get you off track. When you already said that you're coming in a little muddle-minded this morning.
Yeah, I am a little muddled today. Forgive me.
I'm working against you here. We were in Project Serpo. We did an exchange. You were speculating on as why we would do this.
Yeah. Well, what's in it for the Ebens?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the two kind of narratives. They're altruistic. They just want to learn about us. They just want to. They're just they're like Starfleet. They're just explorers. They want to seek out new life and new civilizations,
whatsoever.
and they just want to get to know us.
Do you buy that?
No.
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 Why don't you buy it?
The older I get, the more I see an angle behind everything.
Yeah.
Anyone says to me.
Well, and why aren't they open to the public then, just in completely transparent? Why don't we see them walking down the street and at our summer festivals and barbecues instead of secretly working with the government in the shadows and abducting people without their consent?
Yeah.
Right? And all of that, not nice.
Yeah.
Not
and
nice.
I mean, in terms of
and I mean, there's probably a moral relativism at play where they might not have the same concepts of morality and respect for the individual rights of others. They might have no concept of that, so they might not have any sense that abducting someone without their consent and performing an experience on them is any moral breach whatsoever.
Yeah, and that's often included in people's UFO abductees' description of the Greys is they seem very cold and emotionless, or at least have a very limited range of emotions.
Yeah, and I again, I'm going to derail you a little bit here. I apologize.
Oh,
but
whatever.
I can't stop it when a thought jumps in my head. But one of the greatest things I found this week, I was listening to another podcast that's really good. I think it's called Area 52. I can't remember the host's name. But I was listening to some of his stuff this week, and I thought he had a really great insight where when you only experience an interaction with someone in this sliver, that's all you know of them, right? And you don't have the rest of the context. So it's like if you go to the hospital for a surgery and say a surgeon operates on your knee, you only know them as surgeon, right?
Yeah.
And you only know them in the context of that function. They cut you open and they, do a medical procedure. And that's all you know. But you don't know what kind of music they like. You don't know how big their family is. You don't know what sports they like to follow or play on the weekend. You miss all of that context and you just see them as surgeon. Mm-hmm. And our experience of these aliens might be like you were just describing from the Serpo stuff, of them having a religion of sorts, a culture, a preferred way of communicating, and a social hierarchy.
Yeah.
So you miss all of that context when you just get abducted and put into a trance and operated on, right?
Yeah.
So of course they're going to seem cold and mechanical, but that doesn't mean there isn't a whole culture there that you just don't have context for.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool idea.
Where was I?
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to go on a bit of a tangent here because I was reading about Zeta Reticuli and Planet Serpo and these gray aliens from this planet, and I wondered if I could add some credence of my own to this story. So I wanted to come up with another, what I thought was a novel use for artificial intelligence. So I posed a question to my chat bot.
Yeah.
And I said, if human life were to have evolved on a planet around a red dwarf star, how, I didn't lead it with any questions about aliens.
Yeah.
I said, how would it, differ in physical appearance?
Morphology.
From humans on Earth. And please show and explain your work, AI. Started with the eyes. They would look different. The physical differences would start with the eyes. If we were on a planet around a red dwarf, it describes our eyes would look like polished obsidian. And they'd also be quite a bit larger. We would see more into the infrared side of the spectrum. We wouldn't see the entire visible spectrum as humans do. It would lean more into the red and the infrared. We wouldn't be able to perceive the color blue at all, which I thought was interesting. We would also have kind of thin membranes behind our eyelids, like a second eyelid.
Right.
Because the thing about red dwarf stars are inherently less stable than our own stars.
Yeah, as far as we know, yeah.
There's a lot more kind of
flares.
Erratic
Yeah.
solar activity, bursts of radiation.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose for the second eyelid, to protect against these bursts of radiation. Interestingly enough, the Vulcans on Star Trek have the exact same thing.
Oh, wow.
It's mentioned in one episode.
Yeah.
So of course I know that. Skin would be pale gray and slightly reflective, adapted to diffuse bursts of radiation.
Right.
Skeletal, this one's a bit more speculative. Taller and more willowy due to lower gravity. This is speculating that the planet itself has lower gravity.
Right.
But again, a red dwarf star, it can have planets varying in sizes just like our star. This just assumed it was a lower gravity planet. Blood would be copper-based and blue in color, similar to octopuses on Earth, to more efficiently carry oxygen in lower temperatures.
So I have to ask, though, just because I know AI generally comes up with its content based on its reference database.
Yeah.
So I know you didn't specifically lead it, but does the question itself, is that just going to immediately lead it to sources of information where other people have speculated on the same topic?
Possibly. But it did give reasons for these things.
Right, yeah.
It did give very convincing reasons for these things. So yeah. I found that absolutely fascinating.
Okay, cool. Oh, I like it. It does align. It does align, right?
Yeah, and we've had so much of alien gray lore ties to Zeta Reticuli for some reason.
Yeah.
The The Project Serpo documents mention it. Bob Lazar mentions it.
Yeah.
Betty and Barney Hill mention it very specifically.
So when you start to see a pattern there, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, is there some credence to that, right? If it keeps popping up, or is it just being recycled from earlier frames of reference?
So the first reference of Zeta Reticuli as part of this lore comes from
Betty and Barney Hill.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah.
And Betty and Barney Hill didn't mention it specifically. Do you want to talk about the Hill case?
Yeah, I mean, actually, we're getting pretty long on time, but yeah, because I know we've mentioned that case, but we've never done an episode on. I'm sure most people listening are probably familiar, but let's in brief, just kind of recap Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah, so Betty and Barney Hill, they were traveling. They had taken a trip to Montreal, and they were driving back home through the
West Virginia, right?
New Hampshire.
The
White Mountains of New Hampshire is, I think, what the area is called. And they're driving at night, and they see this light in the sky that's following them. And they didn't know what it was, but it seemed to be following them. So Barney Hill, he stops the car, and he got out, I think, a pair of binoculars. And he was looking at this thing, and he sees this, disc-shaped alien craft. And he can very distinctly see these creatures. He says there's 8 to 10 of them looking out at them through these windows or portholes on the craft. He's looking at this thing, and his wife is screaming at him like, "Barney, you damn fool, get back in the car." So they get back in the car, and they attempt to flee, and this craft follows them. And they say they remember the craft landing on the road in front of them, blocking the road. And these creatures emerge and are approaching the vehicle. And then that's where their memory ends. The next thing they know, Barney is back at the wheel. He is driving down the road, and 2 hours have passed, and they have no memory of those 2 hours.
Yeah.
So over the next few years, they both start having these recurring nightmares, or just memories they can't place of being taken away by these creatures and some really scary stuff being done to them.
Yeah.
So they eventually go through a hypnotic regression.
Yeah.
Independently of each other.
Yeah.
And part of what makes this story so credible is they went through hypnosis independently, and they told the exact same story, is that they were abducted by these creatures that were described very much as gray aliens, and had very invasive medical procedures done to them, and experiments on their reproductive organs, basically.
Yeah.
And they both said they felt extremely violated by this whole experience. And Betty Hill, in her hypnosis session, she recalls asking one of these creatures where it came from. And
it showed her a star chart.
Yeah, this creature gestures towards a star chart, which Betty Hill drew from memory.
Yeah.
And this,
but at the time had no context for.
Yeah.
It's just a field of stars.
Yeah. And her drawing was identified as a chart of the Zeta Reticuli star system.
I forget, do you happen to have the name of the researcher who actually...
I don't have that in my notes.
Okay, I don't have it either. If I have the bandwidth to dig it up, and I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, basically there was a ufologist, a researcher very interested in this case at some point, then took her drawing and painstakingly reviewed star charts from our own astronomical records and found the correlation to Zeta Reticuli. Mm-hmm. Now, this in itself is a controversial piece of evidence that, again, some people hold it up as very solid, and other people have tried to debunk it in various states. So we can't necessarily take that one to the bank. It's another point of division in the community, but it's compelling.
Yeah. And then, in the early 90s, you had Bob Lazar. He talks about, as he was working at S4, he was told the craft he was working on was from the Zeta Reticuli system. He had no idea how they knew that. He was just told that's where it was from. Now, the Betty and Barney Hill story, that had been covered in the news in the 60s.
Yeah.
Very possible Bob Lazar was aware of that story and incorporated that element into his story.
Right.
And the next reference to Zeta Reticuli, the Project Serpo documents, supposedly from the 60s and 70s, but these documents, I'm using the air quotes thing again, these documents on Project Serpo didn't become public knowledge until the year 2005, 2006,
right?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So again,
again, this could be lore building upon itself.
Yeah.
If we're taking an ultra skeptical view of this.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we have to keep that awareness. You got to keep that objectivity in the back of your brain, right? It's like, just because things appear to line up doesn't mean it's just not a story that's evolving, right? Yeah. What do you think? Do you have an opinion on that matter?
I think the Hills story seems really credible.
It does. Although I have to say, I do kind of always put a couple dashes of salt on anything that's regression.
Yeah.
Any knowledge that comes from hypnotic regression. I mean, there's a ton of their experience that is prior to the hypnotic regression, and the stuff they pulled out of their hypnosis regression just kind of validates the other experiences they had.
Yeah.
But I do kind of always take hypnotic regression information as a little suspect, because we know you can create under hypnosis, you can create false memories. You can be led by the person doing the regression, right? So
I'm gonna rephrase what I said. The Betty and Barney Hill story is very credible relative to most alien abduction stories.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. For sure.
And I'd say Bob Lazar is very credible relative to other whistleblowers in this area. Agreed. The Project Serpo documents, I do not find those to be particularly credible. A very suspicious document leaks online in 2005 from an unnamed source.
Yeah.
And it's if you're going to describe something that out there, I'm going to need a little more than a document from an unnamed source.
Although there are very good and simple reasons why a source would not want to reveal themselves for doing such a thing. So you got to take that into account. That's understandable why someone would not want to reveal their identity to support those documents. So, and I mean, that could be a whole other episode, whether we want to dive into the Serpo documents and go down the rabbit hole of the analysis. There's a ton of work has been done on those, right? Going down to the typeface.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got time for that here. But anyway, if we can just we're at a really good time, but I did not want to leave today. This is by no means going to be a comprehensive history. We've only got about an hour here. We cannot cover everything.
No, I barely got to half of my notes here.
But I did just, I can't let it go. Like, we have to touch just briefly on the Aleister Crowley stuff and law.
Yes. I'm glad we're touching on that.
Because for me, that was one of my big four kind of questions that I wrote for myself at the beginning of the week of what do I want to kind of uncover. And the big thing was, for me, back in 1919, Aleister Crowley, was doing his occult magical rituals and supposedly made contact with Lam, and it's speculated that he opened a portal, basically. And these beings are actually interdimensional in nature. And through his actions back in 1919, he basically gave access to these entities into our world.
Yeah.
And we do in short order over the next couple decades, all of a sudden abductions start happening. You have Roswell, you have Betty and Barney Hill, and all of a sudden, a few decades later, they're everywhere in our culture.
Yeah.
We see UFOs in the sky all the time. Did he basically open a doorway to some kind of demon dimension? And this whole thing is based on occult magic. What do you think of that one?
I think that's one angle.
It's a fun one.
There's so many angles with the gray aliens. Like, some people say they're demons, they're interdimensional entities,
the robots,
they're aliens,
they're time traveling humans.
They are AI controlled automatons.
Yeah.
That might actually be the secret fate of all life in the universe. We get smart enough to just develop AI.
Yeah.
And the universe is just full of sentient AIs.
Right.
And
yeah.
these Greys are just robot automatons.
Yeah, their basically only purpose is to have an interface with us on our plane of existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why they look vaguely like us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I did find it so interesting that so Aleister Crowley, he makes contact with this entity, and this was part of like a retreat he was doing. He called it the, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, the Amalantra working.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was 5 minutes before you came in. I was sitting down, go over my notes, doing exactly that, going Amalanthra.
And the whole purpose of this retreat was he wanted, him and his followers were trying to summon interdimensional entities.
Yeah.
Through their various rituals they did. Now, anyway, he was working primarily out of New York City at the time.
And this is 1916, 1917.
But he also spent a lot of time in Maine and New Hampshire, and it's not really clear where exactly they did the ritual which summoned this entity Lom. But Aleister Crowley, it said that he preferred to work in the wilderness when doing these rituals. And he was very fascinated with an area in New Hampshire called Mystery Hill.
Right.
It's this interesting ruin in New Hampshire, in just these interesting stone monoliths and structures. And it's not really quite known what their purpose is or who built them.
Right.
It's often called the American Stonehenge. And Aleister Crowley was very fascinated by this location. I found it so interesting that the Betty and Barney Hill abduction happened like right by Mystery Hill.
Right in the same area.
Right in the same area, and potentially in the same area where Aleister Crowley did this ritual to summon Lom.
Another strange coincidence.
But anyway, I was reading all about Lom because I wanted to, like, well, what did Lom have to say to Aleister Crowley?
Yeah.
Lom didn't say anything. There were no words given to Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
But he basically took the appearance of this entity to symbolically send the message: you are being watched, and you are being shaped.
Right.
And isn't that such an angle taken by so many of the stories about extraterrestrials?
Yeah,
They've
is
been
that we're
watching
being
us and shaping our society?
Yeah, we're being
for a
guided.
long time.
Yeah, we're being guided in some way.
Yeah.
If not, a creation of them in the first place.
Yeah.
Which is, you could take that route as well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, great. Yeah, I'm glad we touched on that. Is there anything more you want to say?
Well,
I just wanted to connect those dots because it is interesting.
What do you think? Are the gray aliens actually out there, and what are they?
Well, and I mean, again, on a philosophical note, I could even argue, I would even speculate that we could have even brought them into existence the same way, like in a Tulip sort of way, right?
Yeah.
The same way we brought Loeb into existence.
That seems to be a common theme we discuss on this show, is the power of myth.
Yeah, and how things, once energy is being poured into an idea, it gains some level of substance and agency for all the energy that's being poured into it. So whether they existed in the first place or not, it could very well be that they exist now, based on the fact that they've become so present in our collective subconscious and zeitgeist in our popular entertainment that they just exist. I mean, people have sightings of Superman and Santa Claus. Those sightings exist.
Superman?
Yeah, people have Superman sightings, and people have Santa Claus sightings. Not to the same degree as UFO sightings, but it could be the same thing. It could be brought about in the same way, where so much collective thought, energy, and emotion gets poured into the idea of Santa Claus that he physically manifests into reality from time to time.
I have heard of Wolverine sightings.
Oh, really? There's Wolverine
like
sightings?
Wolverine from the X-Men?
Or the furry animals?
The Wolverine from the X-Men.
Oh.
There's
Really?
There's this character called the Milwaukee Wolverine, or the Milverine. He's this
Oh, yeah?
he's like this mysterious man that's seen walking around Milwaukee that looks exactly like Hugh Jackman as
really?
Wolverine.
Are you sure it could just be a cosplayer though, hey? Or maybe like just an overzealous fan. Maybe.
But he became known as the Milverine.
Was it during Comic-Con?
No.
The Milverine.
Yeah.
That's kind of a lame name. Okay. Well, we're at a really good time. I feel like we've done a good job here covering this. Again, barely scratching the surface. We can only do so much in an hour, folks. But what do you think? Do you think we did a fair job of making a little, I guess, primer compendium on the gray aliens?
I hope so.
I hope so.
There's just so much to get into.
Yeah. Hopefully our audience enjoyed this episode. We unlocked an achievement this week. And this is the shout-out I mentioned. And I mentioned several episodes ago that a metric for success for me was hate mail. Because we've gotten a lot of love and support from the people that have found the show and they're listening. And that's great. But you don't, and I said a couple episodes back, a sign that you've truly made it or are making progress is when you start getting haters. And we got our first hater this week.
It was weird how excited you got about this.
I was ecstatic. It made my day. Thank you, Budmaster, or whatever your handle was.
Budmaster, I think it was.
Yeah, somebody left a comment on YouTube on the Bob Lazar episode. And I won't quote them exactly or mention their name precisely because I actually do appreciate that they took the time to listen to the episode and comment. Honestly, no hard feelings whatsoever. But there was an accusation that we had not done our research for the episode thoroughly and that we got a lot of things wrong. I replied, by the way. I thought, I'm going to take the high road. I appreciate the fact that they listened and cared to comment. Although it was a little rude, if I can give some constructive feedback myself. Manners are always appreciated. But I was willing to take the constructive feedback, and I invited him to write us with, the specifics, so what he felt we got wrong, and if we could verify them, I'll absolutely put corrections in the show notes, because we are not trying to impart any inaccurate information. Of course, we're humans.
It's bound to happen.
We're bound to make mistakes, and we're covering subject matter that, again, has a lot of different sources of varying credibility. The narratives get recycled and repackaged in a million different ways. So yeah, we're gonna make mistakes, right? So, and we never claim to be total subject matter experts in this stuff. We're just enthusiasts having fun. And trying to entertain ourselves and hopefully the audience with some fun stories. So, but thank you for commenting. I hope you're still listening. I hope you listen to more episodes and continue to comment, positive or not. I'll still be excited to see somebody commenting.
I think feedback of any kind is necessary for the growth of the show.
Absolutely.
I thought it was strange how excited you got about getting such a negative comment, but I was happy to see you so excited about it. So I want to make a pitch to the audience.
Start a contest for the most negative.
Record yourself complaining about our show, and we might use it and make you a star.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. Make an audio clip of slamming us, tear us to shreds. Record it and email it to us. Yeah, that's great. It's great. You might win a hat.
Yeah.
Or something fun. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, great time. Let's wrap it up. Yeah. Any final thoughts before we say goodnight?
I never come prepared with final thoughts.
Oh yeah, we always leave it to the end, right? Okay, well, I'm just gonna say thanks for listening, everybody. If you're new here, thanks for listening to this show. We do this once a week, every Saturday. We're a new show, very small, less than 6 months old, but we do our best to show up every Saturday for a new episode. And you can find us at our website, thecommonanomalypodcast.com. All is one word. Go look us up. Go look at our previous episodes. And hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Good night.